Captain Bradford Hayes stood frozen in the cockpit doorway, his phone trembling in his hand. The CEO's voice cut through like ice. "You're done, Hayes. Clear out your locker." 25 years of service evaporated in one sentence. 30 minutes earlier, he'd blocked a black woman in a gray hoodie from boarding business class, convinced she didn't belong. What he didn't know. She was Dr. Naomi Clarke, the surgeon who'd saved the CEO's daughter's life 3 months ago. And the child waiting for her in Chicago was dying. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. If you believe everyone deserves dignity regardless of how they look, hit that like button right now. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because stories like this need to be heard. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The morning sun barely broke through the windows of Piedmont Memorial Hospital in Atlanta when Dr. Naomi Clarke finally peeled off her surgical gloves. 9 hours. 9 hours of standing over an open chest cavity, her hands steady as she repaired a damaged mitral valve that 3 other surgeons had declared inoperable. The patient, a 58-year-old construction worker named Jerome, had been given weeks to live. Now he'd see his grandchildren grow up. Naomi's attending physician clapped her on the shoulder as they left the operating room. "Another miracle, Clarke," he said, shaking his head in amazement. But Naomi didn't believe in miracles. She believed in precision, dedication, and the promise she'd made to herself at 16 years old, that no one would ever die on her watch if she could help it. Naomi was 38, though most people guessed younger. Her deep brown eyes held a quiet intensity that came from years of making life-and-death decisions. She wore her natural hair in neat box braids that fell past her shoulders, and around her neck hung a delicate gold chain, the only piece of jewelry her mother had owned. Both her parents had died in a car accident when Naomi was a junior in high school. Her mother had been a nurse, her father a mechanic. They'd worked double shifts to save for Naomi's college fund, dreaming of the day their daughter would become a doctor. That dream died with them on a rainy November night on Interstate 85. Naomi had been in the car too, sitting in the back seat studying for a chemistry exam. She remembered the screech of tires, the shattering glass, her mother's scream cut short. Then nothing but beeping machines and white hospital walls. The black paramedic who pulled her from the wreckage had held her hand in the ambulance, his voice calm and steady. "Stay with me, baby girl. You're gonna be okay." But at the hospital, a white doctor took one look at her, saw a black teenager in thrift store clothes, and assumed she was uninsured, low priority. He made her wait 3 hours while her internal injuries worsened. By the time another doctor realized the severity of her condition, she'd lost dangerous amounts of blood. 6 months of recovery. 6 months of physical therapy. 6 months of wondering why her skin color determined how quickly she received care. That doctor's prejudice almost killed her. But instead of letting it destroy her, Naomi channeled her rage into purpose. She graduated top of her class, earned a full scholarship to Johns Hopkins, and became a cardiothoracic surgeon by 31. Over the past 7 years, she'd performed more than 800 successful surgeries. Patients called her the miracle worker. Naomi called it justice. Now, at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning, Naomi sat in the doctor's lounge, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion. Her attending had given her the rest of the day off, a rare gift. She was thinking about going home, taking a bath, maybe calling her best friend Tasha when her phone buzzed. Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Chicago. Her heart skipped. Northwestern didn't call unless it was critical. She answered immediately. "Dr. Clarke, this is Dr. Patricia Morrison from Northwestern. We have a situation." Naomi straightened in her chair, exhaustion forgotten. A 7-year-old boy named Isaiah Bennett had been rushed to their emergency room from Kansas City 2 hours ago. Congenital heart defect, critically severe. Isaiah's aortic valve was nearly completely stenosed. He'd undergone 2 previous surgeries at different hospitals, both unsuccessful. His heart was failing. The family had specifically requested Naomi because she'd saved the life of the boy's uncle 2 years ago. "His mother is begging for you, Dr. Clarke," Dr. Morrison said quietly. "We can keep him stable for maybe 18 hours. After that." She didn't need to finish. Naomi was already on her feet, grabbing her bag. "I'll be on the next flight. Text me his full chart. I'll review it in the air." She changed out of her scrubs in the locker room, throwing on the most comfortable clothes she could find, a soft gray hoodie, faded jeans, and white sneakers. She twisted her braids into a low bun, splashed water on her face, and ran. No time for makeup, no time to look polished. Isaiah didn't care what she wore. He just needed her hands. Naomi called a taxi from the parking lot, her mind already running through the surgical approach. The cab driver, an older Ethiopian man, sensed her urgency and drove fast. "Doctor?" he asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Yes," Naomi said, still reading Isaiah's chart on her phone. The numbers were bad. Very bad. "Someone needs you," the driver said. It wasn't a question. "A little boy," Naomi replied softly. "God bless you," the driver said, and pressed harder on the gas. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was chaos, as always. Naomi wove through crowds of travelers, her carry-on bag bouncing against her hip. She'd booked a business-class ticket on Skybridge Airlines, flight SA-318, departing at 2:30. It was 12:15 now. Plenty of time. At the check-in counter, the agent, a cheerful woman with red lipstick, scanned Naomi's ticket and smiled. "You're all set, Dr. Clarke. Gate B17. Have a wonderful flight." Naomi managed a tight smile. "Thank you." She texted the surgical team in Chicago. "Boarding now. ETA 4 p.m. Have the OR prepped and ready." Reviewing his echo and cath reports. "This is going to be tight." Her colleague, Dr. Simmons, replied immediately, "We'll be ready. His parents are here. They're terrified." Naomi's chest tightened. She'd met so many terrified parents over the years. The fear in their eyes never got easier to witness. She walked faster toward the gate, her mind running through the procedure step by step. Replace the valve, repair the surrounding tissue, pray his heart was strong enough to restart after bypass. She'd done this surgery dozens of times, but every patient was different, every heart unique. Isaiah was 7 years old. His whole life ahead of him. Naomi wasn't about to let him become another statistic. At gate B17, Captain Bradford Hayes stood near the boarding entrance, arms crossed, watching passengers filter through. Bradford was 52 years old, a man who carried himself with the rigid posture of someone who'd spent his entire adult life in uniform. His silver hair was immaculately combed, his Navy pilot's uniform pressed to perfection, for gold stripes gleaming on his shoulders. He'd been flying for Skybridge Airlines for 25 years, and in that time, he'd developed certain standards. Bradford believed in order, in protocol, in things being as they should be. And in his mind, business class was reserved for a certain type of person. Professionals. Executives. People who, as he often told his wife, carried themselves with dignity. When he saw passengers who didn't fit that image, it grated on him like nails on a chalkboard. Today was no different. The boarding process had been smooth until Bradford noticed her. A young black woman approaching the gate wearing a gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a casual bun, no makeup, no jewelry except a thin gold chain. She carried a small duffel bag and had her phone pressed to her ear. Bradford's jaw tightened. He glanced at the gate agent, Sharon, a white woman in her 40s who'd worked with him for years. Sharon was scanning boarding passes with mechanical efficiency, smiling at each passenger. When the woman in the hoodie handed over her phone with the digital boarding pass, Bradford saw the words. Business class, seat 3A. His eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. This woman didn't look like she belonged in business class. She looked like she was headed to a college campus or maybe a community center. Bradford had seen this before, people somehow getting upgraded or using miles they didn't earn. It was his job, he told himself, to maintain standards. He stepped forward just as Naomi was about to walk down the jet bridge. "Excuse me, ma'am," Bradford said, his voice sharp enough to cut through the ambient noise of the busy gate. Naomi stopped, confused, and turned around. She pulled one earbud out. "Yes." Bradford's eyes traveled from her hoodie to her sneakers and back up again. "I need to see your boarding pass again." Naomi blinked, surprised. "I just showed it to the agent." She gestured toward Sharon, who was now looking uncomfortable. Bradford didn't budge. "I need to verify it myself. Please." There was something in his tone, something cold and dismissive that made Naomi's stomach twist. She unlocked her phone and pulled up the boarding pass again, holding it out. Bradford took his time examining it, far longer than necessary. Other passengers were starting to pile up behind Naomi, murmuring impatiently. "This says business class," Bradford said slowly, as if the words themselves were suspicious. "Yes," Naomi replied, keeping her voice calm. "I'm flying to Chicago for an emergency surgery. I'm a doctor." Bradford's eyebrow arched slightly. "A doctor." He said it like he didn't quite believe her. "That's right." Naomi's patience was wearing thin. She could feel the minutes ticking away. Isaiah was waiting. Bradford handed the phone back but didn't step aside. "Ma'am, business class has certain standards. I'm going to need you to step aside while we verify your ticket." Naomi's heart sank. She glanced at her watch. 2:20. 10 minutes until boarding closed. "Sir, the ticket is valid. Your agent already confirmed it. I don't have time for this. There's a child in Chicago who needs me." Bradford crossed his arms. "Ma'am, if the ticket is legitimate, there's nothing to worry about. But we have protocols." His eyes flicked over her outfit again, lingering just long enough to make his meaning clear. Naomi felt heat flood her face. She'd been here before. Different setting, same prejudice. "Are you seriously doing this right now?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. Not from fear. From anger. From the sheer exhaustion of being black in America, where even a medical degree and a life-saving mission couldn't shield you from suspicion. "Sharon," Bradford called over his shoulder. The gate agent approached reluctantly, her face flushed. "Can you recheck this passenger's ticket? Something doesn't add up." Sharon took Naomi's phone, scanned the barcode again, and looked at her screen. "Captain Hayes, the ticket is valid. She's booked in 3A. Bradford's jaw clenched. "I can see that. But look at her." He gestured vaguely at Naomi's clothing. "Does she look like someone who belongs in business class?" The words hung in the air like poison. Naomi stared at him, disbelief turning to cold fury. "What exactly are you implying, Captain?" Bradford didn't flinch. "I'm saying we have standards, ma'am. And frankly, your appearance doesn't meet them. I can't allow someone who looks like this to sit with our premium passengers." Several passengers gasped. A woman behind Naomi pulled out her phone and started recording. "This is discrimination," someone shouted. "Let her on the plane," another voice added. But Bradford stood firm, his face hardening into a mask of stubborn authority. "Ma'am, you can take the next flight. Or I can offer you a seat in economy. Your choice." Naomi couldn't breathe. 25 years of fighting, of proving herself, of breaking through every barrier, and here she was, being told she didn't belong. Because of her skin. Because of a hoodie. I'm a surgeon, she said again, her voice breaking. I just finished a 9-hour surgery this morning. I'm flying to save a 7-year-old boy's life. And you're stopping me because of how I look. Bradford shrugged. Rules are rules. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Behind her, passengers were shouting now, some in her defense, others grumbling about the delay. The woman recording yelled, "This is disgusting. Let her on." But Bradford didn't move. And Naomi realized with sinking horror that he wasn't going to. Isaiah's face flashed in her mind. A little boy lying in a hospital bed, his heart failing, his parents terrified. She couldn't let this man stop her. She wouldn't. Naomi stepped out of the line, her hands trembling so badly she almost dropped her phone. The gate area buzzed with tension. Passengers stared. Some whispered. The woman who'd been recording was now live streaming, her voice indignant, "This is happening right now at Atlanta Airport. A pilot is refusing to let a black doctor board a flight because of how she's dressed. This is racism, plain and simple." Naomi barely heard her. Her mind was spinning, desperate. She had to get on that plane. Isaiah didn't have 18 hours anymore. Every minute she wasted here was a minute closer to his heart giving out. She could call her supervisor, but what would that do? Call a lawyer? That would take hours. The police? They'd probably side with the pilot. Then, like a lifeline thrown in a storm, she remembered. 3 months ago. A Saturday night in October. Naomi had been on call when the ambulance screamed into the ER bay. 19-year-old female, massive internal trauma from a cycling accident. The girl had been riding through Piedmont Park when a car ran a red light and hit her at full speed. By the time she reached Naomi's operating room, her heart had been punctured by a fractured rib. Naomi had worked for 11 hours straight, hands steady even as the girl's vitals crashed twice. She'd sutured the heart tissue with microscopic precision, repaired the damaged pericardium, and manually massaged the heart back to life. The girl's name was Emma Sterling. And her father, who'd collapsed in the waiting room when Naomi finally emerged to tell him his daughter would live, was Richard Sterling, CEO of Skybridge Airlines. Richard had gripped Naomi's hand so tightly it hurt, tears streaming down his face. "You gave me my daughter back," he'd sobbed. "You gave me my whole world back." In the days that followed, as Emma recovered, Richard had visited Naomi's office personally. He'd brought flowers, a thank you card signed by his entire family, and something else, his private business card. "Dr. Clarke," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion, "if you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me directly. Day or night. I owe you a debt I can never repay." Naomi had smiled, touched but not expecting she'd ever use it. She tucked the card in her wallet and forgot about it. Until now. Her fingers shook as she pulled the card from her wallet. The number was handwritten in blue ink. She glanced back at the gate. Bradford was now speaking with another airline employee, pointing at Naomi, clearly explaining why he'd made the right decision. Passengers were still boarding around the commotion, though many had stopped to watch. Naomi's heart hammered as she dialed the number. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. What if he didn't answer? What if he didn't remember her? 4 rings. Then, a click. Richard Sterling speaking. His voice was crisp, professional, the voice of a man used to making million-dollar decisions before breakfast. Naomi's throat closed up. She forced words out. "Mr. Sterling, this is Dr. Naomi Clarke. I don't know if you remember me." Silence for half a second. Then Richard's tone changed entirely, warming instantly. "Dr. Clarke. Of course I remember you. You saved Emma's life. How could I forget? What's wrong? You sound upset. Naomi closed her eyes, relief flooding through her so intensely she thought she might cry. Mr. Sterling, I'm at the gate for one of your flights. Flight SA-318 to Chicago. I'm trying to board, but your pilot, he won't let me on the plane. There was a pause. What do you mean he won't let you on? Naomi swallowed hard. He says I don't look like I belong in business class. He's blocking me from boarding because I'm wearing a hoodie and jeans. Mr. Sterling, I just came from a 9-hour surgery. I'm flying to Chicago to operate on a 7-year-old boy who's going to die if I don't get there. This pilot is stopping me because... Her voice cracked. Because I'm black. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long Naomi thought the call had dropped. Then Richard spoke, and his voice was no longer warm. It was ice. Pure, cold, lethal ice. What is the pilot's name? Captain Bradford Hayes. Naomi heard typing in the background, fast and furious. Stay exactly where you are, Dr. Clarke, Richard said, his words clipped. Do not move. This will be handled in 3 minutes. The line went dead. Naomi stood frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, heart pounding. Around her, the chaos continued. Bradford was now waving his hand dismissively at a passenger who was arguing with him. The live-stream woman was narrating every detail. Sharon the gate agent looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Naomi glanced at her watch. 2:25. 5 minutes until the plane doors closed. Her chest felt tight. What if Richard couldn't do anything? What if Bradford refused to listen even to the CEO? What if she missed this flight and Isaiah? No. She couldn't think like that. She forced herself to breathe. In through her nose, out through her mouth, the way she did before every surgery. Steady. Calm. Focused. But inside, she was screaming. Bradford Hayes was feeling rather satisfied with himself. He'd maintained order, protected the integrity of business class, and put an entitled passenger in her place. In his mind, he'd done exactly what a captain should do. Sure, there were a few passengers complaining, but passengers always complained. They'd get over it. He was in the middle of instructing Sharon to offer the woman an economy seat when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. CEO Richard Sterling. Bradford's hand froze. Richard Sterling never called pilots directly. Never. Company protocol was clear, captains reported to fleet managers, who reported to operations directors, who reported to regional VPs, who reported to Sterling. The CEO calling him personally could only mean one thing. Something was very, very wrong. Bradford's throat went dry. He stepped away from the gate, turning his back to the crowd, and answered. Yes, Mr. Sterling. He tried to sound confident, authoritative, but his voice came out thin. There was no greeting. No preamble. Richard Sterling's voice cut through the line like a blade. Hayes. You just refused to board Dr. Naomi Clarke on flight SA-318. Is that correct? Bradford's mind raced. How did Sterling know? How did he know already? It had been less than 2 minutes since the confrontation started. Sir, there was a concern about her appearance. She didn't meet our standards for business class seating. I was following protocol to ensure the comfort of our premium passengers. Standards? Richard's voice exploded through the phone so loudly Bradford had to pull it away from his ear. Passengers nearby turned to look. You think you get to decide who belongs on MY airline? You think you have the authority to humiliate a passenger based on how she's dressed? Bradford stammered, Sir, I didn't mean to. I was just trying to maintain. Dr. Clarke saved my daughter's life 3 months ago, Richard interrupted, his voice dropping to a deadly calm that was somehow more terrifying than the shouting. She's one of the finest cardiothoracic surgeons in this country. She was coming from a 9-hour surgery to save a child's life in Chicago. And you stopped her. You humiliated her. You degraded her. Because she's black and wearing a hoodie. Bradford's legs felt weak. Sir, I didn't know she was a doctor. I couldn't have known. You didn't want to know, Richard snapped. You saw a black woman dressed casually and decided she didn't belong. That's not protocol, Hayes. That's racism. And I will not tolerate racism in my company. Not from pilots. Not from anyone. Bradford's heart was hammering now, panic setting in. Mr. Sterling, please, I've been with this airline for 25 years. I have an exemplary record. I was just trying to. You're fired. The words landed like a punch to Bradford's gut. He actually staggered backward. What? Effective immediately. You're terminated. Clear out your locker. Security will escort you from the premises. Bradford felt the world tilting. 25 years. 25 years of service. His pension. His benefits. His identity. Mr. Sterling, please. I have a family. I have a mortgage. I made a mistake, but... You didn't make a mistake, Richard said coldly. You made a choice. You chose to see a black woman as less than. You chose to wield your power to demean someone who was trying to save a child's life. Those aren't mistakes, Hayes. That's who you are. And I don't employ people like you. Bradford's voice cracked. Sir, please, I'm begging you. I'll apologize. I'll take a suspension. Diversity training. Anything. Please don't do this. Did you think about Dr. Clarke when you humiliated her? Richard asked quietly. Did you think about her family? Her career? The dying child in Chicago? No. You thought about yourself. About your prejudices. About your sense of superiority. So now, think about the consequences. The line went dead. Bradford stood there, phone still pressed to his ear, staring at nothing. His hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone. Around him, the gate had gone silent. Everyone was watching. They'd heard enough of his side of the conversation to understand what had just happened. Sharon's eyes were wide with shock. Passengers who'd been defending Bradford earlier now looked away, embarrassed. Then, footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Bradford turned slowly to see two security officers approaching. Both were large men in black uniforms with Skybridge Airlines patches on their shoulders. Captain Hayes, the first officer said, his voice professional but firm. We need you to come with us. Bradford felt like he was moving through water. I need to. Now, sir. The second officer's tone left no room for argument. Bradford glanced back at the gate one last time. His eyes landed on Dr. Naomi Clarke, who stood near the wall, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Something sadder. Something that looked almost like pity. He wanted to say something. To defend himself. To explain. But what could he say? The truth was staring him in the face, unavoidable and ugly. He'd judged her. He'd humiliated her. He'd used his authority to put her in her place, because deep down, deeper than he wanted to admit, he believed he was better than her. And now his life was over. The security officers flanked him, not touching but making it clear he had no choice. As they led him away from the gate, Bradford heard whispers erupt behind him. Phones were out. Videos were being recorded. His humiliation was being broadcast in real time. By tonight, the whole country would know his name. And they would know what he'd done. One of the passengers, a middle-aged white woman who'd earlier nodded approvingly when Bradford stopped Naomi, now looked horrified. She whispered to her husband, "Oh my God, he actually got fired." "Over this?" Her husband, looking uncomfortable, replied, "He deserved it, Linda. What he did was wrong." Bradford heard it. He heard all of it. The security officers walked him through the terminal. People stopped and stared. Some pointed. A few took pictures. Bradford Hayes, decorated pilot, family man, 25-year veteran, was now a viral story. The racist pilot who got fired for refusing to let a black doctor board. His career was over. His reputation destroyed. All because of one decision. One moment of prejudice he'd convinced himself was justified. Now, before we continue, I want to ask you something. Do you think Bradford deserved to be fired immediately, or should he have been given a second chance? Comment, number 1, if you think instant termination was the right call, or tell me your thoughts below. And if you're standing with Dr. Clarke and against discrimination in all its forms, smash that like button and subscribe to this channel because we're not done yet. The question now is, what happened to Dr. Clarke? Did she make it to Chicago in time? Let's find out. A different airline employee, a senior manager named Margaret Townsend, rushed to the gate within minutes of Bradford's removal. Margaret was a white woman in her early 50s with graying hair pulled into a neat bun and an expression of deep mortification. She approached Naomi directly, her hands clasped in front of her as if in prayer. "Dr. Clarke," Margaret said, her voice shaking slightly, "I cannot express how deeply sorry I am for what just happened. What Captain Hayes did was inexcusable, disgraceful, and absolutely not reflective of our company's values. Please allow us to make this right." Naomi, still reeling from the past 10 minutes, could only nod. Margaret continued, "We'd like to upgrade you to first class at no charge, and we're going to delay the flight by 5 minutes to ensure you have time to board comfortably. Again, I am so sorry." Naomi shook her head. "I don't need first class. I just need to get to Chicago." Margaret's eyes welled up. "Of course. Please, come with me." As Naomi walked down the jet bridge, her legs felt like jelly. Adrenaline was draining from her system, leaving her hollow and shaky. The other passengers were already seated, and when Naomi stepped onto the plane, something unexpected happened. People started clapping. Not everyone, but enough. A scattering of applause that grew louder as she walked down the aisle. A black man in his 60s, seated in row 5, stood up as she passed. He didn't say anything, just nodded at her with eyes that conveyed a lifetime of understanding. A young Latina woman gave her a thumbs up. A white couple in their 30s smiled warmly. But there were others who didn't clap. Who looked at her with suspicion, discomfort, even hostility. An older white man muttered something to his wife that Naomi couldn't hear but could guess. A blonde woman in business casual crossed her arms and turned away pointedly. Naomi felt it all. The support and the resentment. The solidarity and the prejudice. It was exhausting. She found her seat, 3A, and sank into it. The moment she sat down, she felt tears threatening again. She blinked rapidly, staring out the window at the tarmac. "Don't cry. Not here. Not now." The man seated beside her in 3B, a black man in his 40s wearing a suit, leaned over slightly. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" Naomi nodded, not trusting her voice. The man extended his hand. "Terrence. Terrence Wallace." She shook it. "Naomi." "I know," he said with a sad smile. "Everyone on this plane knows your name now. For what it's worth, thank you for standing up. What you did back there, you just changed something. Maybe not everything, but something." Naomi finally looked at him. "I didn't do anything. I just wanted to get on a plane." Terrence shook his head. You exist. In spaces people don't think you belong. That's revolutionary, whether you mean it to be or not. The plane began taxiing, and Naomi closed her eyes, trying to center herself. She needed to focus. Isaiah was waiting. But her mind wouldn't cooperate. Instead, memories flooded back, memories she usually kept locked away because they hurt too much to examine. She was 12 years old again, standing in front of her 7th grade science class, holding her award for first place in the regional science fair. She'd built a model of the human circulatory system that actually pumped colored water through tubes to simulate blood flow. She'd spent 3 months on it, staying up late every night, teaching herself concepts far beyond her grade level. Her teacher, Mr. Patterson, a white man in his 50s, had called her to the front of the class to present her trophy. But instead of congratulating her, he'd said, "Naomi, this is very impressive. But I have to ask, did you have help? This seems quite advanced for someone your age." The implication was clear. Someone like you. Someone black. Someone from the poor side of town. Naomi had stood there, holding her trophy, feeling the eyes of her classmates on her. Some looked uncomfortable. Others snickered. "No, sir," she'd said quietly. "I did it myself." Mr. Patterson had frowned. "Are you certain? You can tell me if your parents helped. It's not cheating if they guided you." Naomi's face had burned. "My mama's a nurse. My daddy's a mechanic. They don't know about building science projects. I did this by myself." Mr. Patterson had looked skeptical but dropped it. Naomi had returned to her seat, the trophy heavy in her hands, feeling not proud but humiliated. That night, she'd cried to her mother. Her mother, a strong woman who rarely showed emotion, had held her and said, "Baby, listen to me. The world is gonna doubt you every single day of your life. Not because you're not smart enough or strong enough. But because your skin scares them. Your excellence threatens them. So you shine anyway. You shine so bright they can't ignore you." Naomi had carried that advice through high school, through college, through medical school. But it didn't make the doubts easier. At Johns Hopkins, a professor had repeatedly confused her with the only other black woman in their class, despite them looking nothing alike and having completely different names. When Naomi corrected him the 3rd time, he'd snapped, "Well, maybe if you spoke up more, I'd remember you." A white classmate had once said, casually, over coffee, "You're so lucky you got in. Affirmative action really works." Naomi had replied, her voice tight, "I got in because I had a 4.0 GPA and a perfect MCAT score." The classmate had shrugged. "Still. It helps, right?" During her surgical residency, a patient, an elderly white man with coronary artery disease, had taken one look at Naomi in her scrubs and said, "I want a different doctor." The attending had asked why. The man had glanced at Naomi and said, "I want someone experienced. Someone who knows what they're doing." Naomi had been at the top of her residency class. She'd already assisted in over 200 surgeries. But to this man, her skin color meant incompetence. The attending, clearly uncomfortable, had assigned a white resident with far less experience. Naomi had watched from the observation deck as that resident performed the surgery she should have done. She'd cried in the supply closet afterward, muffling her sobs with her hands so no one would hear. But she hadn't quit. She couldn't. Because quitting meant they won. Quitting meant every person who doubted her was right. So she worked harder. Studied longer. Perfected every technique until her hands moved with the precision of a machine. By the time she finished her residency, she was the most requested surgeon in her program. Not because of her skin color. In spite of it. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude, and the seatbelt sign dinged off. Naomi opened her eyes and stared out at the clouds. She thought about Bradford Hayes, wondering if he'd ever once considered what it was like to be her. To work twice as hard for half the recognition. To be questioned at every turn. To have your credentials doubted, your appearance policed, your humanity debated. Probably not. People like Bradford didn't have to think about those things. That was the privilege. The luxury of never having to prove you belonged. Naomi pulled out her phone, switched it to airplane mode, and opened Isaiah's medical file again. His echocardiogram showed a severely stenotic aortic valve, the opening barely wide enough to let blood through. His heart was working triple time to compensate, which meant it was wearing out fast. The surgery would be delicate. She'd have to replace the valve with a prosthetic one small enough for a 7-year-old's heart, then reinforce the surrounding tissue to prevent future complications. One wrong move, one slip of the scalpel, and Isaiah would die on the table. But Naomi didn't think about failure. She thought about success. About Isaiah waking up, seeing his parents, smiling. About him growing up, going to college, falling in love, having children of his own. That's what she fought for. Not awards, not recognition. Life. Pure, precious, irreplaceable life. And no Bradford Hayes in the world was going to stop her from fighting. The plane touched down at Chicago O'Hare at 4:03 p.m. Naomi didn't wait for the seatbelt sign. The moment the wheels hit the tarmac, she was unbuckling, grabbing her bag, moving toward the exit. The flight attendants, who'd been briefed on her situation, didn't stop her. One of them, a young black woman, squeezed her shoulder as she passed and whispered, "Go save that baby." Naomi ran through the terminal, weaving between travelers, ignoring the ache in her legs. Outside, a Northwestern Memorial Hospital ambulance sat waiting, lights flashing. A paramedic jumped out. "Dr. Clarke?" Naomi nodded, breathless. "Let's go." She climbed into the back, and the ambulance tore out of the airport, siren wailing. The city blurred past. Naomi pulled out her tablet and reviewed Isaiah's latest labs, sent by the team just minutes ago. His cardiac output was dropping. His oxygen saturation was borderline. They were running out of time. "How far?" Naomi asked the driver. 12 minutes, he replied, running a red light. "Make it 8. The driver grinned. "Yes, ma'am." They arrived at Northwestern Memorial at 4:27 p.m. Naomi leapt out before the ambulance fully stopped and sprinted through the emergency entrance. Dr. Patricia Morrison, a white woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, met her at the door. "Naomi, thank God. The OR is prepped. Isaiah's being brought up now. His parents are in the waiting room." Naomi was already moving. "What's his current status?" "Heart rate 140, BP 90/50, O2 sat 87% on high-flow oxygen. We've maxed out his inotropic support. If we don't operate in the next hour, he's going to arrest." Naomi's jaw tightened. They headed to the surgical floor. On the way, they passed the family waiting room. Through the glass, Naomi saw them. A black woman in her early 30s, thin and hollow-eyed, clutching a tissue. Beside her, a black man in his mid-30s, head in his hands. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, coloring in a book, oblivious to the terror around her. Naomi stopped. "Give me 2 minutes." She pushed open the door. The woman looked up, and her face crumpled. "Dr. Clarke?" Naomi crossed the room and knelt in front of her. "Mrs. Bennett, I'm here. I'm going to take care of Isaiah." The woman, Keisha Bennett, grabbed Naomi's hands. They said he might not make it. They said his heart is too weak." Naomi squeezed back. "His heart is weak. But I'm strong. And I promise you, I will do everything in my power to bring your son back to you." Keisha's husband, Darnell, stood and gripped Naomi's shoulder. "Please. He's our whole world. Naomi stood. I know. And I won't let him go without a fight. She left before her own tears could fall. In the surgical changing room, Naomi stripped off her street clothes and scrubbed in. 7 minutes of washing, every inch of her hands and forearms. The familiar ritual steadied her. She pulled on her scrubs, tied her surgical mask, and stepped into the OR. The team was waiting. Dr. Morrison would assist. Dr. Patel, an Indian man in his 40s, was the anesthesiologist. Nurse Simmons, a white woman with 20 years of experience, managed the instruments. 2 surgical techs stood ready. And in the center of the room, on the table, lay Isaiah. He was so small. His brown skin was ashy, his chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. Monitors beeped frantically around him. Naomi approached the table and looked down at the boy who was depending on her. She placed a gloved hand gently on his forehead. Hey, Isaiah, she said softly. I'm Dr. Clarke. I'm going to fix your heart, okay? You just rest. Isaiah's eyes fluttered open for a moment. He was heavily sedated but still semi-conscious. Am I gonna die? He whispered. Naomi's throat tightened. Not today, baby. Not on my watch. Isaiah's eyes closed again. Naomi stepped back and looked at her team. Let's bring this boy home. Scalpel. The surgery began at 5 p.m. sharp. Naomi made the first incision, a clean line down the center of Isaiah's chest. Blood welled up, and Nurse Simmons suctioned it away. Naomi worked with absolute precision, cutting through the sternum with a bone saw, spreading the ribs with a retractor. Isaiah's heart came into view, small and purple, beating weakly. Jesus, Dr. Morrison whispered. That valve is completely shot. Naomi didn't respond. She was already assessing the damage. The aortic valve was barely opening, the tissue scarred and thickened from previous surgeries. Replacing it would require removing the old valve entirely and sewing in a new prosthetic one. Delicate work. Dangerous work. Bypass, Naomi ordered. The perfusionist activated the heart-lung machine, taking over the function of Isaiah's heart and lungs. Isaiah's heart slowed, then stopped. The room filled with the mechanical hum of the bypass machine. Naomi began the dissection, carefully removing the damaged valve. 30 minutes in, bleeding started. A lot of bleeding. Suction. Clamp here. Naomi's voice was sharp. Nurse Simmons moved fast, but the blood kept coming. He's losing volume, Dr. Patel warned. BP dropping. 70/40. Naomi's hands moved like lightning, finding the bleeder, clamping it, suturing it closed. Transfuse 2 units. Now. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. Naomi exhaled. Okay. Let's keep moving. By 7:30 p.m., the new valve was in place. Naomi sutured it carefully, each stitch perfect. But then, disaster. Isaiah's heart, which had been still on bypass, suddenly fibrillated. The monitor erupted in a chaotic rhythm. V-fib. Dr. Patel shouted. Naomi's stomach dropped. Paddles. Internal. Nurse Simmons handed her the internal defibrillator paddles. Naomi placed them directly on Isaiah's heart. Clear. She shocked. The heart jumped but didn't convert. Still fibrillating. Again. Clear. Another shock. Nothing. Isaiah's heart quivered uselessly. We're losing him, Dar. Morrison said, panic creeping into her voice. Naomi threw the paddles aside and placed her hands directly on Isaiah's heart. She began manual compressions, squeezing the small organ rhythmically. Come on, Isaiah. Come on, baby. Fight. She compressed. Once. Twice. 10 times. 20. Her arms burned. Sweat dripped into her eyes. "AP," she barked. Dr. Patel injected epinephrine directly into the heart. Naomi kept compressing. 30 times. 40. "Naomi." Dr. Morrison's voice was soft. Naomi ignored her. "He's not done." Paddles again. She shocked a third time. Silence. Then, beep. 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 A rhythm. Slow, but steady. Isaiah's heart was beating on its own. Naomi sagged against the table, gasping. "We got him. We got him." By 10:15 p.m., Naomi was closing Isaiah's chest. The new valve was functioning perfectly. His vitals were stable. He was going to live. When the last suture was in place, Naomi stepped back and looked at her team. They were all exhausted, drenched in sweat, but smiling. "Good work, everyone," Naomi said quietly. "Let's get him to recovery." As they wheeled Isaiah out of the oar, Naomi pulled off her mask and gloves. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline finally crashing. Dr. Morrison put an arm around her shoulders. "That was incredible, Naomi. You saved that boy's life." Naomi shook her head. "We saved him. All of us." But inside, she felt something else. Relief. Gratitude. And a fierce, burning pride. She'd made it. Despite Bradford Hayes. Despite everything. She'd made it, and Isaiah was alive. Across the country, in a modest suburban home in Marietta, Georgia, Bradford Hayes sat in his darkened living room, staring at nothing. It was 7 p.m. Atlanta time, and his life had imploded in the span of 6 hours. After security escorted him from the airport, he'd driven home in a daze. He'd walked through the front door to find his wife, Diane, cooking dinner. She'd smiled at him. "You're home early." Bradford had tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Diane's smile had faded. "Brad? What's wrong?" He'd told her everything. The woman at the gate. The CEO's call. The termination. Diane had listened in silence, her face growing paler with every sentence. When he finished, she'd set down her wooden spoon and looked at him with an expression he'd never seen before. Disappointment. "You refused to let a black doctor board a plane because of how she was dressed." Bradford had tried to defend himself. "Diane, I didn't know she was a doctor." She looked. "Looked like what, Brad?" Diane's voice had been cold. "A thug? A criminal? Someone who didn't belong." Bradford had fallen silent. Diane had shaken her head. "I've overlooked so many things over the years. Your comments about those people. Your complaints about diversity hiring. I told myself you were just old-fashioned. But this? You humiliated a woman flying to save a child's life. This isn't the man I married." She'd walked out of the kitchen, and Bradford had heard the bedroom door slam. Now, hours later, Bradford sat alone. His phone had been buzzing non-stop. Texts from colleagues, some sympathetic, most not. Emails from journalists requesting interviews. Notifications from Twitter and Facebook, where his name was trending. He'd made the mistake of looking once. The video of him refusing Naomi was everywhere. Millions of views. Thousands of comments calling him a racist, a monster, a disgrace. His full name, his age, his employment history, all of it had been dug up and spread across the internet. Someone had even found his home address and posted it online. The doorbell had rung twice already with reporters. Diane had unplugged it. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was his son, Ryan, who was 25 and worked as a software engineer in Austin. Bradford answered. "Ryan? Dad. Ryan's voice was flat. I saw the video. Bradford's chest tightened. Son, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I watched it 3 times. You stopped a black woman from boarding because she didn't look right to you. You used your authority to humiliate someone. And it turns out she was a doctor flying to save a kid's life. Bradford tried again. Ryan, I made a mistake. I didn't. You didn't make a mistake, Ryan interrupted. You made a choice. You chose to see a black woman as less than. As someone who didn't belong. Dad, do you have any idea how ashamed I am right now? Bradford felt like he'd been punched. Ryan, please. I'm ashamed to be your son. The line went dead. Bradford sat in the darkness, Ryan's words echoing in his mind. Ashamed to be your son. He thought about his 25 years with Skybridge Airlines. The thousands of flights he'd piloted. The awards, the commendations. All of it gone. But worse than losing his job was losing his family's respect. Diane wouldn't speak to him. Ryan had disowned him. His daughter, Emily, who lived in Oregon, had sent a single text, I can't believe you did this. Don't call me. Bradford had spent his entire life believing he was a good man. A fair man. A man of principle. But sitting alone in his dark living room, watching his life crumble, he was forced to confront an ugly truth. He'd been a good man to people who looked like him. To everyone else, he'd been a gatekeeper. A judge. Someone who used his power to keep people in their place. And that place, he realized with sickening clarity, had always been beneath him. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Naomi sat in the hospital cafeteria at 11 p.m., nursing a cup of terrible coffee. Isaiah was stable in the ICU, his parents at his bedside. Naomi had checked on him 20 minutes ago. He'd been sleeping peacefully, his new heart valve functioning beautifully. Keisha had hugged Naomi so tightly she could barely breathe, crying and thanking her over and over. Darnell had knelt and kissed her hands, calling her an angel. Their 5-year-old daughter, Zara, had shyly offered Naomi a crayon drawing of a heart. Naomi had accepted it, her own eyes filling with tears. Now, alone in the quiet cafeteria, she felt the weight of the day crashing down. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and saw she had over 200 notifications. She opened Twitter and immediately regretted it. The video of Bradford stopping her had gone viral. Hashtags like #JusticeForDr Clarke and #RacismInTheSkies were trending. Thousands of people were sharing the video, expressing outrage. News outlets were picking it up. CNN. NBC. The Washington Post. Naomi Clarke was suddenly a national story. She scrolled through the comments. Most were supportive. This woman is a hero. Bradford Hayes is a disgrace. Imagine being so racist you stop a doctor from saving a child. Dr. Clarke deserves an apology and compensation. But there were others. She should have dressed more professionally if she wanted respect. Why is everything about race? Maybe the pilot had a legitimate concern. She's playing the victim. I'm sure there's more to the story. Naomi closed the app, her hands shaking. She didn't want to be a symbol. She didn't want to be a hashtag. She just wanted to do her job. But she knew that wasn't an option anymore. The world had seen what happened. And now she had to decide what to do with that attention. Dr. Morrison found her in the cafeteria. There you are. The hospital administrator wants to talk to you. They're fielding media requests. CNN wants an interview. Naomi shook her head. I don't want to do interviews. I understand. But Naomi, this story is bigger than you now. People are angry. They want to hear from you. Naomi looked up at her colleague, exhausted. What do I even say? That racism is real. That it happens every day. People who don't want to believe that won't be convinced by me. And people who do believe it already know. Dr. Morrison sat down beside her. Maybe. But sometimes people need to see a face. To hear a voice. You could help a lot of people by speaking out. Naomi thought about it. About all the times she'd been silent. All the times she'd swallowed her anger and kept working. Maybe it was time to stop being silent. 2 weeks passed. Bradford Hayes spent those weeks in a haze of unemployment and humiliation. He'd applied to 3 other airlines. All had rejected him within hours. His name was poison in the industry. Worse, Diane had moved into the guest bedroom and was consulting with a divorce attorney. His kids weren't returning his calls. He'd lost his job, his reputation, and his family. One evening, desperate for something, anything, to numb the pain, Bradford drove to O'Malley's pub, a dive bar near the airport where pilots used to gather. He ordered a beer and sat in the corner, hoping no one would recognize him. But someone did. An older black man, maybe 60, with graying hair and a weathered face, slid into the seat across from Bradford. "You're Bradford Hayes," the man said. It wasn't a question. Bradford tensed. "Look, if you're here to tell me what a piece of garbage I am, save your breath. I already know." The man shook his head. "I'm not here to insult you. I'm here to tell you a story." Bradford frowned. "Why?" "Because I used to be you." The man extended his hand. "Marcus Thompson. Retired pilot. United Airlines. Flew for 32 years. Bradford shook his hand hesitantly. Marcus ordered a drink and settled back in his chair. "I was the first black pilot United hired in 1978, Marcus began. "Do you know what that was like? White passengers refused to fly with me. They'd get off the plane when they saw me in the cockpit. My co-pilots wouldn't speak to me. One of them told me straight to my face, 'You only got this job because of affirmative action. You're not good enough.' I had to be twice as good as everyone else just to be treated half as well." Bradford listened, shame curling in his gut. Marcus continued, "For years, I was angry. Furious. I hated white people for what they did to me. And that hate started to poison me. In 1985, I was working a flight out of Denver. A young white guy showed up at the gate dressed in ripped jeans, long hair, looked like a homeless punk. I took one look at him and decided he didn't belong in first class. I stopped him. Questioned his ticket. Made him wait while I verified it." Bradford's breath caught. Marcus nodded. "Sound familiar?" "Yeah. I did exactly what you did, Bradford. I judged someone by their appearance and used my power to humiliate them. Turned out, that homeless punk was a 24-year-old engineering genius flying to fix a critical system failure at a nuclear plant. My prejudice almost caused a disaster." Bradford stared at Marcus. What did you do?" "I apologized," Marcus said simply. "I found him after the flight, tracked him down, and apologized face to face. Told him I was wrong. That I'd let my anger turn me into the very thing I hated. And then I changed. I started seeing people instead of stereotypes. It wasn't easy. Took years. But I did it." Marcus leaned forward. "Here's the thing, Bradford. You can't undo what you did. Dr. Clarke will carry that humiliation for the rest of her life. But you can choose what happens next. You can become bitter, blame everyone else, and die angry. Or you can learn. You can change. You can become better." Bradford's eyes were wet. "It's too late for me. I've lost everything." Marcus shook his head. "No. You lost a job. You lost some respect. But you haven't lost your humanity unless you choose to. The question is, are you willing to do the work? Bradford sat in silence for a long moment. Then he asked, how? How do I even start? Marcus pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the table. This is Dr. Clarke's office address in Atlanta. She's back from Chicago. Go apologize. Not because you want forgiveness. Not because you want your job back. But because it's the right thing to do. Bradford looked at the address, his heart pounding. What if she won't see me? Then you tried, Marcus said. But you owe her that much. The next day, Bradford enrolled in a racial equity training program offered by a local nonprofit. He started volunteering at a community center in a predominantly black neighborhood, helping kids with homework. He read books he'd never read before, listened to voices he'd never listened to. It was uncomfortable. Often painful. But he kept going. 3 weeks after the incident, Bradford drove to Piedmont Memorial Hospital. His hands were sweating as he walked through the lobby, past nurses and doctors, until he found Naomi's office. Her name was on the door, Dr. Naomi Clarke, M.D., cardiothoracic surgery. He knocked. After a moment, the door opened. Naomi stood there, surprise flickering across her face. What are you doing here? Bradford swallowed hard. Dr. Clarke, I came to apologize. Naomi's expression hardened. You think an apology fixes what you did? No, Bradford said quickly. I know it doesn't. What I did was unforgivable. I humiliated you when you were trying to save a life. I judged you by your skin color instead of your character. I was wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. Naomi crossed her arms. Why are you here, Bradford? To make yourself feel better. Bradford shook his head. I'm here because I need you to know that I'm changing. I can't undo what I did. But I've spent the last 3 weeks trying to understand why I did it. And the truth is, I was raised to believe I was better than people who look like you. I never questioned it. Never examined it. I just believed it. And I'm ashamed. Naomi studied him for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. Come in. Bradford entered her small office, lined with medical textbooks and framed degrees. Naomi sat behind her desk, and Bradford sat across from her, feeling like a child called to the principal's office. Do you know why I became a doctor? Naomi asked. Bradford shook his head. Naomi took a breath. When I was 16, my parents died in a car crash. I was in the car with them. A black paramedic pulled me out and held my hand the whole way to the hospital. He saved my life. But when we got there, a white doctor saw me, saw my skin, and assumed I was just another poor black kid without insurance. He made me wait. For 3 hours. By the time another doctor realized how badly I was hurt, I'd lost so much blood I nearly died. That doctor's prejudice almost killed me. Bradford felt sick. I'm so sorry. Naomi continued, but instead of hating that doctor, I decided to become one. So no one would ever be turned away because of their skin. I've spent my entire career fighting prejudice. And then I ran into you. Bradford's voice broke. How can you be so forgiving? Naomi leaned back in her chair. Because hate doesn't heal, Bradford. It destroys. I've seen too much destruction. I choose to heal. She extended her hand across the desk. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it. But because holding on to anger will only hurt me. You have to live with what you did. That's your burden. But I won't let your prejudice make me bitter. Bradford shook her hand, tears streaming down his face. Thank you. Thank you so much. 6 months later, Isaiah Bennett celebrated his 8th birthday. He ran around his backyard in Kansas City, laughing and playing with his friends, his new heart valve functioning perfectly. His parents, Keisha and Darnell, watched from the porch, tears of joy in their eyes. Naomi had flown in for the party, and Isaiah had tackled her with a hug the moment she arrived. "Dr. Clarke. You came." Naomi laughed, hugging him back. "Of course I came. I wouldn't miss your birthday for the world." Isaiah pulled back and looked at her seriously. "When I grow up, I want to be a doctor like you. So I can save people too." Naomi's heart swelled. "Then you will be. I believe in you, Isaiah." As the party wound down, Naomi stood in the backyard, watching Isaiah blow out his candles. This was why she did it. For moments like this. For lives saved. For futures made possible. In Atlanta, Bradford Hayes walked into the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center, a building in a neighborhood he'd never visited before 6 months ago. A group of 10 and 12-year-old kids were waiting for him in the classroom. Bradford had been volunteering here every Saturday, teaching a class called Introduction to Aviation. Most of the kids were Black or Latino, from low-income families who'd never imagined they could be pilots. Bradford set down his bag and smiled at them. "All right, who wants to learn about how airplanes fly today?" A young black boy named Jamal raised his hand eagerly. "Mr. Hayes, can I really be a pilot? My dad says people like us don't get to do stuff like that." Bradford crouched down to Jamal's level, looking him in the eye. "Jamal, you can be anything you dream of. Anyone who tells you otherwise is wrong. You are smart. You are capable. And you belong in any cockpit you want to fly. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." Jamal grinned. "Okay, Mr. Hayes. I'm gonna be a pilot." Bradford felt something in his chest, something warm and unfamiliar. Hope. He'd never get his old life back. Diane had divorced him. His kids were slowly, cautiously, beginning to speak to him again, but the relationships were still strained. He'd never fly for a major airline again. But he'd found something else. Purpose. A chance to make amends, not through words, but through action. By lifting up the kids he'd once looked down on. By showing them they mattered. That evening, Naomi was back in her Atlanta office, reviewing charts, when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it and saw a photo. It was Bradford, surrounded by smiling kids at the community center. The message read, "Dr. Clarke, I know I can never undo the harm I caused. But I want you to see what you inspired. These kids have dreams now. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure they know they belong. Thank you for forgiving me. And thank you for being who you are. Respectfully, Bradford Hayes." Naomi stared at the photo for a long time. Then she typed back, "Keep going. The world needs more people willing to change. Take care, Bradford." She set down her phone and looked out her office window at the Atlanta skyline, glowing in the evening light. The world hadn't changed overnight. Racism still existed. Prejudice still thrived. But people could change. One person at a time. One conversation at a time. One choice at a time. Naomi thought about Isaiah, running and laughing, alive because she'd refused to give up. She thought about Bradford, teaching kids who looked like her that they belonged in the sky. And she thought about herself, still standing, still fighting, still healing. The road was long. But she wasn't walking it alone. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Bradford's redemption was genuine? Can people truly change after moments like this? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel because stories of resilience, justice, and transformation need to be told and celebrated. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for caring. May you always have the courage to stand up for what's right, the strength to keep going when the world tries to stop you, and the grace to forgive without forgetting. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and keep fighting for a better world. Peace and blessings to all of you. This story reveals profound truths about prejudice, redemption, and resilience. First, racism isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it's subtle, hidden behind standards and protocols, making it even more insidious. Captain Bradford believed he was maintaining order, but he was enforcing bias. Second, systemic discrimination has real consequences. Naomi wasn't just humiliated, a child's life hung in the balance. Prejudice doesn't exist in a vacuum, it ripples outward, affecting countless lives. Third, credentials and accomplishments don't shield black professionals from racism. Despite being a renowned surgeon, Naomi was judged by her appearance, not her expertise. This reflects a painful reality: excellence isn't always enough to overcome prejudice. However, the story also offers hope. Change is possible. Bradford's journey shows that confronting our biases, however uncomfortable, can lead to genuine transformation. Forgiveness, as Naomi demonstrated, isn't about excusing harm, it's about refusing to let bitterness consume us. Finally, representation matters. Bradford's work with young students proves that dismantling prejudice begins with showing marginalized children they belong everywhere, including places they've been told they don't. The most powerful lesson: one person's courage to stand firm in their dignity can spark change. Naomi didn't just save Isaiah's life, she challenged a system, inspired millions, and reminded us all that justice requires both accountability and grace. What's your biggest takeaway from Dr. Clarke's story? Do you think Bradford's redemption arc was realistic, or does racism leave scars too deep to heal? Have you ever witnessed discrimination like this, and how did you respond? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and I want to hear your perspective. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think, feel, or want to take action, please hit that like button right now. It helps this message reach people who need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that challenge, inspire, and empower. And here's the big one: share this video. Send it to your family, your friends, your coworkers. Post it on social media. Because stories like Dr. Clarke's need to be amplified, discussed, and remembered. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for caring about justice. May you always have the courage to stand up when it's hard, the wisdom to recognize your own biases, and the grace to choose compassion over hate. Until next time, keep fighting for what's right, keep lifting others up, and keep believing that change is possible. Peace, love, and blessings to all of you.